Okay, so let's see. We're at Exodus 10. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may perform these miraculous signs of mine among them, that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians, and how I performed my signs among them, and that you may know that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, "This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says: How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will bring locusts into your country tomorrow. They will cover the face of the ground so that it cannot be seen. They will devour what little you have left after the hail, including every tree that is growing in your fields. They will fill your houses and those of all your officials and all the Egyptians, something neither your fathers nor your forefathers have ever seen from the day they settled in this land till now." Then Moses turned and left Pharaoh. Pharaoh's officials said to him, "How long will this man be a snare to us? Let the people go, so that they may worship the Lord their God. Do you not realize that Egypt is ruined?" Then Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. "Go, worship the Lord your God," he said, "but just who will be going?" Moses answered, "We will go with our young and old, with our sons and daughters, and with our flocks and herds, because we are to celebrate a festival to the Lord." Pharaoh said, "The Lord be with you, if I let you go, along with your women and children. Clearly you are bent on evil. No, have only the men go and worship the Lord, since that's what you have been asking for." Then Moses and Aaron were driven out of Pharaoh's presence. And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over Egypt, so that locusts will swarm over the land and devour everything growing in the fields, everything left by the hail." So Moses stretched out his staff over Egypt, and the Lord made an east wind blow across the land all that day and all that night. By morning the wind had brought the locusts. They invaded all Egypt and settled down in every area of the country in great numbers. Never before had there been such a plague of locusts, nor will there ever be again. They covered all the ground until it was black. They devoured all that was left after the hail, everything growing in the fields and the fruit on the trees. Nothing green remained on tree or plant in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh quickly summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now forgive my sin once more, and pray to the Lord your God to take this deadly plague away from me." Moses then left Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord, and the Lord changed the wind to a very strong west wind, which caught up the locusts and carried them into the Red Sea. Not a locust was left anywhere in Egypt. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward the sky, so that the darkness will spread over Egypt, darkness that can be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky, and total darkness covered all Egypt for 3 days. No one could see anyone else or leave his place for 3 days. Yet all the Israelites had light in the places where they lived. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, "Go worship the Lord. Even your women and children may go with you. Only leave your flocks and herds behind." But Moses said, "You must allow us to have sacrifices and burnt offerings to present to the Lord our God. Our livestock too must go with us. Not a hoof is to be left behind. We have to use some of them in worshiping the Lord our God, and until we get there we will not know what we are to use to worship the Lord." But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was not willing to let them go. Pharaoh said to Moses, "Get out of my sight. Make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die." "Just as you say," Moses replied. "I will never appear before you again." Now the Lord had said to Moses, "I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here, and when he does, he will drive you out completely. Tell the people that men and women alike are to ask their neighbors for articles of silver and gold." The Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people, and Moses himself was highly regarded in Egypt by Pharaoh's officials and by the people. So Moses said, "This is what the Lord says. About midnight I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn in Egypt will die, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sits on the throne to the firstborn son of the slave girl who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or ever will be again. But among the Israelites not a dog will bark at any man or animal. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. All these officials of yours will come to me, bowing down before me and saying, 'Go, you and all the people who follow you.' After that I will leave." Then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh. The Lord had said to Moses, "Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in Egypt." Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go out of his country. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be for you the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. They are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. That same night they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or cooked in water, but roasted over the fire, head, legs, and inner parts. Do not leave any of it till morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. This is the Lord's Passover. On that same night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, both men and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. This is a day you are to commemorate. For the generations to come you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat bread made without yeast. On the first day remove the yeast from your houses, for whoever eats anything with yeast in it from the first day through the 7th must be cut off from Israel. On the first day hold a sacred assembly, and another one on the 7th day. Do no work at all in these days, except to prepare food for everyone to eat. That is all you may do. Celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because it was on the very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. In the first month you are to eat bread made without yeast, from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days no yeast is to be found in your houses, and whoever eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off from the community of Israel. Whether he is an alien or a native born, eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, Go at once and select the animals for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some of the blood on the top and on both sides of the door frame. Not one of you shall go out the door of his house until morning. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the door frame, and he will pass over that doorway. He will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. Obey these instructions as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you, as he promised, observe this ceremony. And when your children ask you, What does this ceremony mean to you? Then tell them, It is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians. Then the people bowed down and worshipped. The Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. At midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner, who is in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was a loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. During the night Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said, and go, and also bless me. The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs, wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people, and they gave them what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. Many other people went up with them, as well as large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. With the dough they had brought from Egypt, they baked cakes of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast because they had been driven out of Egypt and did not have time to prepare food for themselves. Now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt. Because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt, on this night all the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for the generations to come. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, These are the regulations for the Passover. No foreigner is to eat of it. Any slave you have bought may eat of it after you have circumcised him, but a temporary resident and a hired worker may not eat of it. It must be eaten inside one house. Take none of the meat outside the house. Do not break any of the bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. An alien living among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in his household circumcised. Then he may take part like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat of it. The same law applies to the native born and to the alien living among you. All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, and on that very day the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions. That is huge. That's wonderful. Lots of really great stuff here. let's go back and take a look at this. There were some things that I noted in here. One of the first things is Exodus 10. Have to forgive me, I'm blind. 10:3, I think it is. Exodus 10:3. It says, "So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and told him, 'This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says: How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me?'" Once again, I really want to point out that it's very easy, and granted, he absolutely was the bad guy here. He was the bad guy. It's really easy to shake your head at Pharaoh and say, "My gosh, Pharaoh, you had your entire country coming to you and saying, 'My friend, please, we're all going to die if you don't let these Egyptians go.'" But Pharaoh is the embodiment of us all. He is a physical embodiment of us all. As we he is the sin spirit. Now, granted, he was absolutely a real guy. He was a real man, and but if I look at his life and the things that he's saying, God is performing these amazing and very pointed things to punish the Egyptians, and he already knows. God lives outside of time. He knows who and who is not going to be a part of his kingdom. I don't know that, so I will teach everybody. I will reach out to everybody. But he knows how every single thing is going to happen. And he knew that he knew exactly how Pharaoh was going to react to all of this. And I used to really question, well, of course, Pharaoh reacted like that. He kept hardening his heart. But he knew already that even if he had not, that Pharaoh was very comfortable with being Pharaoh, with having slaves, and not only having these slaves, but keeping them in that position. He would never have thought to let them go. He liked them being in that position because free slave labor, and also he kept them down. The Israelites' population had blossomed and had grown very, very large, and the Egyptians conspired to absolutely keep them under their thumb, and just give them enough so that they were happy to stay under that thumb, even though they were wailing out, because I mean they had their promise that they were going to be set free, but they lived there for 400 years under it, so it was everything that they knew. But Pharaoh to me, I used to really blame him. A lot of blame shifting, like, wow, Pharaoh, I would have done things differently. But really, would I have done things differently? Now, maybe I wouldn't have had 600,000 plus women and children slaves underneath me, but I have sin. I have the things that I'm comfortable with that I know that God is not in line with. And when he asks me to let them go, the compromises begin. But what if I just let this part of it go? What if I just hung on to this? What if I just let the men go? Would that be cool? Because that's what you're asking for, right? You're asking me to let your people go out into the desert and worship, but I don't really want to change anything. So I'm going to honor you in this because I can see that your God is real and he's scaring my people and he's kind of scaring me. So why don't I just compromise a little and say this so that I know that we can return back once the crazy dies down, right? Uh-uh. No, and then God wasn't having that, and God's asking again, hey, you need to let this go. Oh, well, what if I just let the women and children go too, since you're asking a lot more firmly, and now I'm a little more scared, and the people around me are a little more scared, and I'm starting to see the fallout of my decision to ignore your request. What if I just negotiate that much? Because then we still have the herds and flocks, and if you're probably going to come back for all your stuff and your animals, and if you don't, well, at least I have that. So I'm still getting stuff out of this. I'm still hanging on. And it isn't until God thrashes your heart bloody and humbles you to your knees that you let it go. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? I can't fault Pharaoh because I am him. I want to. I want to fault Pharaoh, but I am him. I hang on to my sin. I hang on to my comfort. I hang on to all the things I'm afraid of losing if God asks for it. It sucks. And when he asks for it, can I let it go? Or will I negotiate? If you ever thought that the Old Testament didn't have the Word of God breathed into it, you are wrong. You are so wrong. I do also want to talk about some other things in here. Um, let's see, this is Exodus 12:11. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste, it is the Lord's Passover. Um, so, excuse me. The Lord touches me. Alexa, stop. He really just touches my soul a lot. So it's talking about how we are supposed to live our lives ready for when God asks us to move. Now, this was a literal eat it with your cloak tucked in, because he was trying to tell them, be ready to move quickly, because Pharaoh's going to be really upset and he's going to want you to move, and I want you guys to move. It's going to be time. This is absolutely it. You're going to move. But he hasn't stopped that to this day. We are supposed to live our lives ready for God to move us. And he was not going to be moving them into a comfortable situation. He was taking them from their homes they had had their entire lives, and he was going to be moving them into a desert journey. Now, I think the actual journey from Egypt to the Promised Land, where they were going to be, is like 11 or 14 days. I'll have to look it up. I'm sorry, I don't have that information right now. I think it's 14 days actual journey. I know that they ended up spending 40 years in the desert. That's a different story that's coming up. But he was not going to be moving them into a comfortable situation. He was moving them into a situation where he was going to create relationships with all of those people. Suddenly, it's an intimate father-child relationship in a bad situation, um, but a triumphant situation. I mean, we don't, we haven't gotten there yet, but they're going to be chased by the Egyptians. They're going to have to cross an impossible river. They're going to have to go into the desert where there's no food or water and completely rely on everything that the Lord has said to them. Stories passed down about their forefathers, and I'm sure that it seemed to them like it does to us, stories from a long time ago. And they're going to have to put their entire lives on the line believing those stories. Um, Even having seen these insane things going on, and now miraculous signs and wonders aside, these went well beyond that. This wasn't a magic show, this was devastation to Egypt, one of the richest and prosperous and enlightened civilizations, and they were devastated in days. Just amazing. And now, this God that has this kind of power is leading them out into the middle of the desert. But He wants us to be ready for us to move into an uncomfortable position to get us where we need to go, because we trust Him most in uncomfortable positions. It's not easy. It's not easy to trust all the time. When we end up trusting each other and failing each other, and that's what we know from the moment we're born, that maybe our trust gets shaken, and maybe our love gets shaken. And we filter God through those human emotions. We filter God through those human interactions. And we think, because God has made us in His image, that God is somehow like that. But God is not like that. He is different entirely. He loves you without fail. He doesn't stop because you mess up. He doesn't walk away. We do. He waits for us. He waits for us and loves us and caretakes over us. How many times in your life have you stopped and you thought, man, that was just the thing I needed. That was just what I needed. That was just the thing I needed to hear. Man, I really needed that hug. I'm so glad I got that hug. I'm so glad I got to hear from that person. That was really great that they called. All of those things are those little moments, those little caretaking moments, just out of the blue. It's that intimate relationship. He wants us to be ready to move so that we are useful to Him. And then Exodus 12, 13, the blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. Jesus. That's Jesus. When He sees the sign of the blood on you, He will pass over you. Jesus paid that price for you. It's already done. It's already paid for. Your sins are covered. And all you have to do is accept it. It's the most insane thing ever. It's like, it boggles my mind that he could be that generous and merciful. There's not a day that goes by that I don't do something that I'm ashamed of and humbled for. Things I haven't given up that I have to go to him and say, I didn't give this up. I'm trying again to let it go and take it out of my hands because I can't apparently give it up. All of these things, he has already laid the blood of Jesus Christ over. I accepted it. I accepted Jesus. I accepted what he did for me, and I accept that he loves me no matter how imperfect I am. Having said that, I also have to accept that he loves everyone, including the people who have hurt me, including the people who didn't love me back, didn't love me enough, didn't love me in the way I needed to be loved, fell short, fell through, didn't go far enough. He loved them because he loves me, and I'm the same. How many times have I not loved enough? How many times have I fallen short? How many times have I not carried through? How many times have I lied to someone? How many times have I betrayed somebody? How many times have I sinned against my neighbor? How many times? How many times have I fallen short of the glory of God? Against my fellow man, against those I profess to love. How many times? And it's not even like I want to, although sometimes I have. Sometimes I've given myself over to sin and thinking that this is going to feel great, this is going to be wonderful, this revenge is going to be wonderful, whatever it is, this is going to be wonderful, and it's not. It never is. It has its season. Sometimes that season is incredibly short. Maybe it's seconds, maybe it's moments, maybe it's days or months. Maybe it's years, and God stops and says, hey, now that we have this intimate relationship and we talk, let's talk about what happened here. Oh, and God, I don't want to talk about what happened here. I want to forget about that. Didn't you already put blood over that? Yeah, you did. But I still need to acknowledge it. I still need to acknowledge that I did that. So I can maybe not do that again. And maybe I still need to apologize to that person because they're still hurting and they haven't healed from it. Maybe I need to reach out and say something. Because even though we're forgiven, and even though God has wiped the slate clean, he still has those intimate, personal relationships with his children, and I am not the only child. And that's one of the hard things to accept about following Jesus. Take up your cross. Ouch that I have to call and fix things. Ouch that I have to reach out and say things. Ouch that I have to forgive when hanging on to that anger and that pain. Feels so good. It makes me feel righteous to be angry at that person for hurting me. Makes me feel justified to hang on to that pain. They hurt me bad. Makes me feel okay for the way I responded. And that probably wasn't in line with God either. Lastly, I want to talk about how Moses didn't know he was Moses. And by that, I don't mean that Moses didn't know his name. Moses had no idea that he was going to be a pretty big deal 2,000 years later, 3,000 years later, through however long later. He had no idea, I'm sure, that he was going to be that big of a deal. I mean, understand that he was an Israelite born into slavery, cast into a river, rescued, brought up in royalty, taking advantage of the same people that he came from, maybe not openly, but certainly just by living, he was taking advantage. Then murdering, trying to do all the things that I'm sure he wanted to do right by his people. I'm sure he wanted to do something. I'm sure he wanted to do things on his own steam. And God put that plan out of commission right away. But he murdered someone and fled into the desert, did not face what he had done, ran away from it, ran into the desert, started to become just kind of a shepherd in the desert, married a girl, had a father-in-law, was creating a family, very, very, very on the down low, just kind of just like average Joe. I'm just like all of you, not a big deal. Except he was a very big deal. And you can tell he didn't know he was going to be a big deal, because when God came to him in a burning bush and said, hey, this is how it's going to go down, he says, I have faltering lips, and he stuck with that. I have faltering lips. I can't speak. Don't send me. Don't send me to face everything I've done. I've already turned away from that. It's already covered over. I don't want to bust the scab on that one. I don't want to unearth all of that past guilt and shame and dashed dreams and all of that of my youth. Don't send me. But God already had Aaron on the way. He knew what Moses' response would be, and he wasn't going to let him walk away from it, because he had a plan. God had a plan for Moses. Moses, who didn't think anything of himself, God had a plan for him, an amazing, huge, gigantic plan to be this patriarch over the Israelites and guiding them through the desert. He had a plan for all of that. And here Moses went with Aaron and spoke to Pharaoh and was realizing this is all Pharaoh, all God in his talks to Pharaoh. This is all God's power, everything is God's power. He's realizing that, and as he's going into the desert with them, he continues to realize that. And I don't know if he ever really got to the part where he thought he was going to be Moses. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if he ever got to where he knew he was going to be a big deal. Now, granted, he's just a human vessel that God worked his wonders through. He is just he's just one of us. He isn't a big deal as far as that, but he was beloved by God. We're all beloved by God. But God used him in an amazing and very visual way. So let me say it that way. God used this person in an amazing and very visual way to display his glory and his power, and to be a testimony to generations after. Now, I'm sure that Moses thought that his name would continue because Jewish tradition was to carry those stories and carry those names and carry all the teachings of their forefathers, and to carry that, and bless them very much for doing so. And that way we have so much knowledge. So I'm sure that he thought that that would be, his legacy, that he would have those stories told. But I don't know, if he knew how far that would travel, that everyone in the world would have heard about him thousands of years later, and learning from him. Like, I am learning from him. Just reading these things out loud, and it gives them a voice to me. It makes them real. I understand them. The human emotions come out, and I see myself in them. And when I think about that, I think about how Moses probably felt in the desert when he was getting his life back together, and he had found a girl, and he had his father-in-law, and he was getting together his flocks, and he was trying to do things right. And you can tell he had a relationship with God, but it wasn't going to be the relationship he would have with God. He was trying to get it together. He was in the middle of his story. And he wasn't yet that very visual evidence of God. He was just still on that very personal relationship level with God, where he would go and speak to God and have conversations with him. And I'll tell you this much, I may not hear God speaking audibly to me, but he does speak, and I do hear him. But here in the desert, when God's coming to him and saying, "These are my plans for you," he wasn't Moses yet. He wasn't this gigantic visual display of God's glory and power and planning. He was just at that personal relationship level. Here's the thing, and this is why I mention it, because maybe you don't know who you are yet. Maybe you're still at that personal relationship level. And note you that that never changed between Moses and God. That relationship was always there, in the desert, in Egypt, in the desert again, on the way to the promised land. It never stopped. In fact, it grew intensely because Moses leaned harder and harder on God. But maybe you're in the middle of your story and you're thinking, I've done all these things. God can't use me. I don't know how to speak well. I don't know how to do this well. I don't know how God can use me. Guess what he does? He knows exactly how he's going to use you, and he could care less about your faults because he gave them to you. And I'll say that again, he gave you your faults. You have a stutter, it's his. You don't feel as smart as you need to be, his. You don't think you're beautiful, his. Whatever it is about you that you don't like, God is using it. All of you is his. He created you exactly like he needed you to be, to perfect his glory, to show his glory, to be his visual representation of his power and his strength and his glory. You're in the middle of your story, wherever you're at, and maybe you just don't know you're Moses yet. And now, granted, you may never be asked to go before Pharaoh and lead the Israelites out of Egypt. But there may be something else gigantic, a huge movement that God is making that he needs you to be a part of. Moses just needed to be open and have communication with God to learn what his part was going to be. Now, Moses may have spoken back and said, "Hey, I don't speak very well." I know how he felt. I don't speak very well. Please don't ask me. I'm comfortable where I'm at. But his heart was still soft. In the end, he did what God needed him to do, and it worked out really well. So tonight I just want to remind you, keep your heart soft. Know that you are created exactly as God needs you to be. He already knew you before he knit you together in your mother's womb. He already knew everything that you would ever do and how you would react. He knew you were his son or his daughter. He knew how he would use you in his plan, and you are needed and necessary. It blows me away. It puts me in awe. There's so much out there that's telling you that you're not needed, you're not necessary, you're just popping into existence, that you weren't created, that takes away from the glory of God, or attempts to. It doesn't, but it attempts to. And when you listen to those lies, they are not of God. Everything he says is that you are for me. I'm blown away. I'm absolutely blown away. And thinking of the entire Old Testament where he was setting things up, and then thinking of the New Testament, he made sure that everyone was included, Jews and Gentiles, everyone is included in that promise. Everyone. He knows who won't accept it, which breaks my heart, and I'm sure it breaks his. because he died for them too, but they're never going to turn their faces and be healed. It breaks my heart, and he absolutely wants them to. One of my favorite stories is about Jonah being told to go to Nineveh, and Jonah was mad. He was super mad. Did not want to go. He was like, "Yep, right. Heard you right, Lord. Yep, I'm gonna go exactly the other way. I'm gonna go somewhere else. But good to hear from you. I'm gonna peace out this way." And he tried that. Didn't work out for him. I don't know if you read about Jonah and the whale, or the large fish, whatever you want to say. But God was like, no, no. I need you to go to Nineveh because they're just as important to me as you. I'm going to need you to go there and tell them about me. And when he did, the entire place listened to him, and he half jobbed it the whole way. He's just like, I just wanted to tell you that you're God. He did not want to do it. He didn't want to go there. He didn't want to tell them about God, because he knew if he did, that if he opened his mouth to them, he knew that they would turn their faces and be healed. He knew it. And he knew his God was a God of mercy, that he wanted to bring them in, and he did not like the Ninevites. He didn't want to forgive them. He wasn't sorry that they were going to be lost. He didn't feel any of that. He was like, I'm good with God, and that's all that needs to happen. Well, that's not the spirit we get to have as Christians, right? We all need to go to Nineveh and tell people about God. We need to remember what I'm saying is that God didn't just love Jonah, he loved the Ninevites too, and he wanted them to hear about him. And the second that they did, they turned their faces and praised him. And Jonah was salty. He was salty about it the whole time. Now, that's not the spirit that God wants us to have. It's not. But I find him amazing. I could probably talk about him for a long, long, long time. And I have talked about him for a long time. He just blows me away. He blows me away. These stories make me just gasp. If you knew how many times I have read things here, read things there, read in the Bible, and now stopping now at this season of my life after I have gone through a bit of desert, stopping and seeing and hearing, it's like it just blows me away. That intimate relationship that he has with me blows me away. But I am also intensely grateful. Oh, there's nothing like it to see his relationship with other people. Have you been in church and been surrounded by a cloud of witnesses? Have you been there with other believers when they raise their hands and praise, and everyone is praising? Have you seen somebody when they accept Jesus that very first time and you can feel it? that relationship. And I know when people are outside of that relationship and they haven't accepted Jesus, that they think we're a bunch of wackos believing in some sort of sky daddy. And they can poke fun and they can prod, and that's completely fine. And I hate how sometimes we're not on the same page, but that's sin, and that's the devil, and we're all at different places in our walk. But wow, if they knew. And that's why we keep talking about him. That's why we keep sharing him. That's why we step out of our comfort to reach out, because Jesus didn't come just to hang out with the Christians. He didn't come just to hang out with the people who liked him or loved him, because that would have been easy. It would have been easy. It would be easy for me to just be with God, to just be with church people, to just be with Christians, to just not. And see, that was a lot of the thing beforehand, was that Jewish laws and traditions told them they weren't supposed to be around people of ill repute, that they weren't supposed to be around Gentiles. It was against the law, against Jewish law. They avoided them. But when Jesus came, he made a beeline right to them. He made the way, paved the way. He paved the way to make that relationship. So please, if you are thinking at all that maybe you need something in your life besides your own self-centered push, besides all the strength that you've been trying to go on, if you've been Moses before he was Moses, if you're trying to do everything on your own strength, if you're trying to do all the great stuff, that's wonderful, but it's gonna fall short, because it's not God's plan. It's not the full glory. It's easy to be a decent person if you put some effort into it. You know, I was a decent person. I didn't try to hurt anybody. Didn't try to lie. I didn't try to be rude or arrogant. I remembered birthdays for the most part. I did all the things. Did all the things you're supposed to. And I was dead inside. I was filled with holes where all the ugly things lived. I was sliding down a slope, and I didn't want to get back up. I was so tired. And you may not have even seen it from the outside, because I was so nice and I was chirpy and bubbly and caring and nurturing. But I was broken. The insides were filled with glass. And every time I moved, I bled. And I hugged despair and desperation and depression around me like pillows. They were chains around my neck. And I fell privy to everything that the devil wanted to say to me. And he pushed me and pulled me in whatever way he wanted to. I was given over to everything that he just wanted to do. And let me tell you, he was closing in. He was absolutely closing in. There was a lot of spiritual evidence in my life at that time that let me know he was closing in. And it was just random one day on my couch. Just random, sitting there thinking about my life and all the things that were going on and all the craziness that was happening and how I just wanted it to stop. And I said out of hand, God, I just need my life to change. I need this all to change. And I thought it was one of those things that you just say, that you just say because you're just kind of wishing out loud, whistling in the dark, whatever it is that they say. You just say it because you want it, but you don't really think it's going to happen. Because you've been trying to change it on your own. You've been trying to do it on your own steam. So I said it, and I forgot it, because it's just one of those things you say. But God had actually been waiting for me to say it. And within months, just a few actually, my entire life was changed. I was in a completely different home. I no longer had a car. I no longer had everybody was taken out of my life. Didn't have anybody in my life. I was alone. I was very, very alone. My landlord was the one that took me to go get food. Not always. So I had no food, and I had no heat in the middle of winter in New York. And I was living in a trailer, which is a metal box. And it was so cold. There was no water because the pipes froze. There was electricity, so at least I had lights and I could still do my job. And I praised God like crazy the first time I got a space heater. I had to learn how to talk to God there. I would sit with all my clothes on underneath all my comforters, and I had, thank God I had like a bed warmer that would go underneath the covers so that at least during sleep I could kind of warm up. But boy, some of my best conversations happened with God then. He was like, you are going to talk to me. Because I sure wasn't talking to him when I was tootling around in my car and laughing it up with all my people and all my friends and everything else that were people who didn't really care about me. They didn't care about me. But I was desperate and giving everything over to them to make sure that they stayed. Because I didn't care about me. But in the trailer, I certainly learned to talk to God there. I certainly stopped and had to talk to him because he took away everything that was a distraction between he and I. Every single thing, everything I had been using as a distraction to not talk to him, he took away. I got to keep my job. That's what I got to keep. But everything else. And let me tell you, I know that this is kind of personal, and I apologize if you're uncomfortable with that, but all of this is personal. Our whole relationship and walk with God is personal. There was a thin stream of water that came out of the bathtub. I was super grateful for. And I learned how to put glass jugs and fill them up with water and then heat them in front of the space heater, so I had hot water. And eventually I did get enough money to have a tank of gas put in. It was like $600 and some odd dollars, so it took me a minute. But I had like my little cook pot stove, and I eventually figured out that Walmart, I know everybody hates on Walmart, but I will always be grateful for them because they brought me food by delivery. Canned food, ramen noodles food. I didn't have to depend on anybody or ask anybody for anything, which may or may not come. And let me tell you, when you have to ask for every single thing and be grateful for every single thing, that is humbling. It can strip you down real fast. And it did. It sure did. Especially if they say no and you need it. But talking to God there, I had always thought that you were supposed to talk to him like these like old language sounding prayers, or because God still felt really remote to me or distant, and I didn't know who he was. I mean, I had been raised in the church, but that personal relationship thing, I didn't understand how God could love me, so I didn't take that in real well. And so all my life when I had tried to pray to him, it was more the Our Father stuff. Not that that's wrong. That's absolutely correct still. But it wasn't the way that God was wanting me to speak with him then. What he wanted me to do was have a conversation with him, like I'm having a conversation with you. He wanted me to tell him and talk to him and rage at him and tell him what I was scared of and trust him and love him and know that I was loved beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I'm so grateful. that He took everything. I'm so grateful that He removed everything in my life that was distracting me from Him, so that I would finally stop and create that relationship with Him. Or answer, because that relationship was already created on His side. Let me tell you, that relationship with Him is already there. It's not even a thing that you have to really create. And I say that because it was me opening up and saying, yes, I will accept this relationship and I will grow into it. I will get to know you. I will do the work on my side. Like all those phone calls that you have to make to get to know somebody better. And when you hang out or go to lunch or, whatever it is, all those things that creates that friendship there. God has already done all that work. It's just your turn now to accept it and to realize that it's there in its entirety. He's already madly in love with you. You just have to accept that and fall into it and create that relationship and go deeper in it until you can return that mad love. Until you return it, and until you can start telling other people that that relationship is already theirs as well. It's important that you realize it's not just your relationship with Him. When I left the trailer and moved to Texas, I thought I was out of the woods. Like, that had been months and months in that trailer, and I was going through some of the worst time of my life. And then I got to Texas, and things fell apart for me again, not once but twice, to the point where I again did not have a home and didn't have anywhere to go, and was shell-shocked, just completely shell-shocked. But I tell you this, that God stepped in supernaturally and saved the day. I don't know what it's like where you're at, but where I'm at, it takes a long time to find a place. And to be able to save up the money to go to that place. And it can be thousands of dollars. And I tell you this, that while I was in the trailer, all the things that God had removed from me, He started to replace, but with the things that He intended, like His version of things. Where I was purchasing friendship, He provided friendship, and not only just a good friend. It was a friend that I had known before, but now she's a saved woman. And when I needed to know, because I felt like I had no idea what love was. I didn't understand how God could love me, and I didn't understand or really believe that people loved each other either. Because the way I loved was encompassing, and I didn't think anyone loved like that. And I just didn't believe it. And so He sent me somebody that loves like that, like He does, who met me where I was at. Because when she met me where I was at, I was still cursing. I was still just beginning my walk with God. Super very beginning my walk with God, and I wasn't even anywhere near there yet. But you know what she didn't do? She didn't judge me. She didn't do anything but tell me that God loved me, that she loved me, and that she was there for me. And then when she said, I'm there for you, she meant it. And still means it. And when I want to judge myself so harshly and just hate myself, she doesn't. Even when I think, now I've done it, now I've done, I'm disgusting enough of a person that she just can't love me now. She does. She loves me the way God loves me. She just sees me as his child. When I lost my home for the third time in Texas, I had 4 days to find a home. 4 days. And nobody. I was looking at homelessness and I thought, wow, God, I don't know what to do here. I don't know what to do. Because I didn't have anything. There was no way I could do anything. And I thought, if you'll just take care of my cats, if I could just have someone take care of my cats, because a lot of times our animals keep us hanging in there, And, we had been through a lot together. They were in the trailer with me. They were on the move to Texas with me. If someone will just take care of them, I can live on the streets until I have enough money. I'll figure it out. I'll live in a shelter, whatever I have to do. But God had different plans. And it's just amazing. My friend stepped in to help me financially. Um, but then I was in a car in a 5-minute drive from work to my house that I had to leave. In a 5-minute drive, telling the Uber driver that my life was falling apart, and that's basically where I was at, because nobody is really supposed to answer how are you doing with with the truth, but I did. And by the time that we had reached my house, he had already made a decision that he says, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come pick you up in the morning, and you're going to take me back to my house, and you're going to take my car, and you're going to go find a place. This person I had met 5 minutes before. 5 minutes before. And then he gave me his phone number, and I gave him mine so that we could arrange it. And I was so grateful, and I hope I was praising God, because I feel like I did, but I was completely numb with everything that was going on. I was just battle shocked. And he calls me when he gets home, and he says, I spoke with my wife, and she said, why don't you tell her about the apartment finder that helped us? And he gave me this gentleman's name and number, and guess what? I had an appointment with him the very next morning. And I took the car to the appointment where that young man picked out the exact perfect place for me to be. And now, mind you, it was a week before I could get in there, but my friend helped me with a hotel that would keep me safe and my animals and all my stuff. And the nice gentleman in the Uber helped me move from my house to the hotel, and then came back and moved me from the hotel to my apartment. And no matter how I tried, would not accept money. So God bless him. God bless him. But I firmly believe that we have entertained angels without knowing. Because I cannot rationally believe someone who had met me in 5 minutes would offer up their very nice vehicle. It was actually a really nice car, so I don't think that he was just offering me up a beater. He was offering up a really nice new car for this complete stranger to drive around in. And then helped me without any kind of acceptance of return to get to where I'm at. That personal relationship. God steps in supernaturally into our lives and shows us signs and wonders all the time. But how long will we wait before we humble ourselves before Him? How long are you going to hang on to those things? How are they serving you? There is a time to get on your knees. There's a time to let that stuff go. It doesn't serve you. It's a distraction between you and your God. All you have to do is accept Jesus Christ into your heart. Tell Him you need Him. If you've stepped away from Him, reaffirm that relationship and tell Him, I'm sorry. I know I walked away, but I'm here. Please be a power in my life. I need you. Forgive me. I promise you're the one that walked away. When Peter stepped out of the boat and began to walk towards Jesus on the water, he was walking towards Him. And when he began to sink between the waves, he lost sight of Jesus. He lost sight of Him. And he began to sink, and he was in fear of drowning. And he called out, Lord, help me. And Jesus reached down and pulled him out of the water. And I want you to know that's because he was already walking towards Him. He was already there. He was right there, just waiting for that hand up to grab. Waiting for Peter to say, catch me, help me. If you've lost sight, He's still right there. If you want to get out of the boat, He's still right there. He wants that relationship with you. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have an amazing, wonderful day. I could talk about Jesus and God and that relationship forever. I just praise His name. I praise His holy name. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for that relationship. I'm so grateful for that relationship. Anyway, I hope you have a blessed day, and thank you so much for listening.